it's time for us to zoom in a little bit on a bit more focus around our business, a little bit focus around business aviation. And that's with great honor that I now am presenting two of my colleagues, Saskia and Harry, that will be presenting some things and findings around what we are working with in our day-to-day. So Saskia, she is Director of Customer Success, and her focus is to talk to our customers and engage, but also understand what is the needs in our markets. And she has so much great insight thanks to all the professional people she's talking to every day and every week. We will then be followed by one of my favorites, Harry, and he is so genius when it comes to data and numbers. And he connects all these numbers and helps us to give actionable insights on a very close future, understanding trends and data. So with that, I want to hand over to you, Saskia. How are you doing?
Hi, Sam.
Hi.
I'm great. How are you?
I'm good. Is it still early in the morning in Texas?
I'm beginning to wake up, so I think we're good.
You have your coffee ready and you're ready to present some great stuff for us now.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. So it was great to hear Daniel Levine, as an expert, talk about the future. So what I want to do for the next couple of minutes is really talk about you and what you've been planning in this industry, what you've been talking about, and really focus on our industry specific. And as Sam already mentioned, we really enjoy talking about our customers and talking with you, understanding what you're planning. So again, taking all of that information and understanding what you want to do in the future is what we're going to be looking at. Now, if we're talking about the next 20 years seems like such a long time. I mean, it really is the time from raising a child and sending them off to college or university. Now, that seems like a very long time, to me at least. But it's also the time that newer aircraft slots came into the industry. If you look at this picture, this is the Global 5000 that launched in 2002. And I know some of you speak with your customers and you refer to this aircraft as a newer aircraft. Well, that is 20 years ago. So again, if we look at it that way, 20 years does not seem that far. However, it is hard to talk about what you predict to be happening or what you're planning in the next 20 years. So I'm going to take a little bit of a step into what we think the industry will look like in the next 20 years. So growing wealth is the absolute determining factor for future growth in our industry. And there has been an enormous amount of growth, and Daniel mentioned this as well. We also continue to see that growth. We believe that, or we know that the ultra high net worth individual will continue to grow. At the same time, we also see that business aviation, they project a 3% average annual growth rate from deliveries, and that's in line with the worldwide long-term economic growth. Now, as wealth growth, we know that new people enter this industry. We also know that the cost of operations hopefully will remain flat. It's a little bit hard to say how much we will grow in the future, how much wealth will grow, and how much we as an industry will grow. And that has to do with how much technology will take over. If we are able to reduce our costs, the growth of our industry might become so much bigger. So it's to be seen. Now, let's take a look at the different markets. And this is how the markets look today. And as you can see, the US has really the majority of the private jets in our market. Europe is a close second. We don't predict much change with this. I know Asia was a big dream a decade ago, and it looks no closer. I would say the only market that could be a surprise development would be Africa. And again, that's something to be seen in the future. Now that we've looked at so far in the future, in 20 years, let's take a step back and let's take a look at what the next 5 to 10 years can do and really what you've been saying about the next 5 to 10 years. I would say one of the most popular topics that we talk about today is data and the desire of using data to predict the future and really looking at historical data, historical pricing, again, to make better decisions and to ultimately run your business more efficient and being able to increase your bottom line. So I know that Daniel spoke about big data. He spoke about artificial intelligence, AI, machine learning. And when I talk about big data and artificial intelligence in our industry with you, I think one of the big topics that comes up is optimization, and specifically fleet optimization, the desire to reduce costs and to increase your efficiency on your fleet. Now, this is something that came over from the commercial airline industry, and it is the ability to plan, to better schedule, and to suggest changes powered by artificial intelligence. And this is definitely something that is a topic that we hear more and more these days. Second to that is revenue management. It's really using the data from past historic events and using data from the competition to see how you should price your operation. And yield management has been something that's been used by the travel industry for many years, and we are starting to see this in our industry as well. Maybe you should price differently based on different routes. Maybe you should price differently based on the day of the week. Things that people are starting to think about. Customer insights is another thing that is gaining popularity. What do I mean with that? Is really creating a customer experience that is optimal for your customer. There's a lot of people these days that are using CRM systems, and making sure that you connect the CRM system with your booking platform. We have backend APIs that will allow you to connect CRM systems with our systems. Again, once you're quoting, that you have your customer information with you once you're quoting, and you know exactly what the preference of your customer are. So those are things that we see increasing as well. Now, let's take a look at some things that are hot in the travel industry. And we really believe that looking at the travel industry gives us a sense what is coming to our industry. And I think right here what we see is voice assistants and chatbots, something that's really getting popular in the travel industry, but also other industries. So I'm curious to see what is going to be taken over by our industry from that. We already spoke about revenue management. And then the other part that you see right here is the biometric recognition. And Daniel spoke a little bit about this as well. Let's see what will be implemented in the next 5 to 10 years when it comes to facial recognition. Now, the ultra net or high net worth individual is a unique person. And I think Daniel spoke about this as well. It's definitely someone who wants to have that personal touch. But we do believe that customers would like to have a digital travel experience. Let's take a look at the next slide. So we don't think that everyone would need to book online, but perhaps you would just want to make sure that you could view all of your bookings, or maybe be able to request a change, maybe being able to pay for your trip, either online or at least through your mobile device. So if we now look at the travel industry one more time in the next couple of graphs, and again, digitalization is a trend. We saw over the last, in this case, 8 years, definitely a change on how people book on the commercial airlines industry or the travel industry. They went from booking with a travel agent, so the brick and mortar, to booking online. And this is a trend that we have also seen on our end. If we look at Avinode, we measure where trips are coming from in Avinode, and we've actually seen an increase in trips that are being searched through third-party applications. And third-party application can be a web application that's on your website to get an inquiry about price, or it could be a booking application that you've created on your iPhone app, but it's definitely an increasing number. So the desire of being able to book online is there. I would say that these trips are typically the trips that are booked on smaller aircraft. So that is a trend that we're seeing as of right now, and we're carefully monitoring. Let's talk about something else, mergers. I think everyone sees mergers in the news. I would say maybe not every week, but it's pretty frequent. We expect them to continue to happen. One thing that might be interesting to point out is that we've also seen brokers starting to acquire operator certificates. And that is something that I'm curious to see if we will continue to see that in the future. Every merger is obviously unique, but there could be a connection that there is a need to access supply. Obviously, last year in the United States, it was a extreme when it comes to supply and demand. The summer in Europe became pretty challenging as well. So perhaps a reason for operators to continue expanding and having that supply available, and really the same reason for brokers to being able to have access to a fleet themselves. Curious to see what will continue there. Last thing is the seat sharing model. And this was very popular pre-pandemic, and then the pandemic happened, and we're kind of curious to see what would happen. But if we hear the news, people still like to do the seat sharings. The companies that offer seat sharing seem to be doing very well. So we will continue to see if this continues to grow. And this might also be driven by new customers entering our segments. I mean, the new flyer might start with seat sharing, and then also technology. I mean, if we are getting these autonomous flying vehicles out there, the eVTOLs, that could be per seat as well. So it's interesting to see what would happen here. I think overall, what's kind of been the theme is that I don't have a crystal ball. I wish I had, and I'm sure all of you wish I could give you one, but we don't. And ultimately, what we need to do is look at previous experiences and look at data, and then we might be able to make better assumptions. So with that being said, I think I am going to introduce my colleague Harry, who is our data expert, and he will be able to at least give you some peek and some insights on the data that we have. Harry, over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Saskia. As Saskia mentioned, yeah, I guess my challenge is to be that crystal ball to a certain extent. And I will give it a go. I'm going to use data that is just kind of passing through the Avanode marketplace and kind of try and make some interpretations based on that, just a few. And yeah, let's crack on. It's going to be a little bit shorter timescale. I can't really give accurate things what's going to happen in 5-10 years, but I can certainly kind of give a few inklings of what might happen in the next 1 to 2 months. So going to start by talking about some pricing trends. And we've got 2 charts here, one for trips within Europe, one for trips within the USA. And what you're looking at here is basically the median and the average mean pricing quote per hour over a 5-year period. So we go from the left-hand side being the start of 2018 to the right-hand side being where we are today. Both of these charts obviously show that pretty steady increase throughout of those prices just going up for the quotes that we kind of aggregate through the Avanode marketplace. What's interesting is if you overlay this with the fuel prices, obviously the two are very, very strongly correlated, particularly in the US. It very much mirrors exactly kind of what happened there. On the European side, it appears that there's been able to be a bit more, if you look at some of those seasonal trends, there's more seasonality there, and there's been more of an ability to really push some yields in certain periods, kind of independent of that fuel price. I think if we talk a bit more, extending that, the insights further, is how can we decouple that fuel price relationship with the prices charged to be less kind of one-to-one relationship? I think that's the big opportunity, and I think as Saskia was talking about data and optimization, all these things, that's kind of the link that needs to be kind of pursued in order to kind of achieve that for the future. Let's shift focus a little bit. Let's look at demand, and we're just going to look at demand within Europe. Once again, this is just looking at data flowing through the Avanode marketplace. So we're looking at trips that are kind of being sourced, and we aggregate that up, and we clean it, and we try and make some interpretations based on it. Now, this chart is a little bit complicated, so I'll just spend a little bit of time explaining what it is you're looking at. Each of these lines is an entire departure month, so it's the entire kind of trips or journeys that we see passing through Avinode for that month. On the y-axis, you've got the year-over-year difference percentage. So what that is saying how much better 2022 is looking than 2021. On the x-axis, you've got 6 months in advance on the left-hand side, going all the way through to kind of the end of the month, which is that 0 days on the right-hand side. What this is showing is basically the build-up of demand over time for a departure month, both historically and into the future as well. A couple of things to pull out here. First of all, for all these months, September through December, which is December 2022, all of them started really a lot stronger this year. The demand started building a lot earlier this year than it did last year. You can see obviously those figures are really very high, and obviously there's no way that was going to stay, but it really showed how much more people were able to this year really think about sourcing travel further in advance. You can see what happened with September and October. They kind of dropped off as we got closer to the end of the month, as you would expect. And they kind of October finished down year over year compared to 2021. When we look at November, there's still half a month to go with November before we know the final result. But November is kind of following that October trend very much. So expecting kind of another decrease year over year compared to 2021. What's interesting, though, I think, is December. You can see the December line, that kind of black dashed line. That's really been holding steady for the entire period, and it's still holding steady today. So I am expecting that to drop once again, unfortunately. But what I would say is that the early prediction would be that for demand within Europe, December is not going to be as negative year over year as November will finish, I would say. Okay, one slide and a couple of charts for me to finish up on. We have a major event incoming, and no surprises for what it is I'm talking about. On the left-hand side, we've got a demand forecast for 2022, just to this region. And on the right-hand side, we've got that same period of time, but we're looking at pricing this time. What's the region? It's the Middle East. We're looking at just demand into the Middle East from everywhere apart from Russia, just because we need to remove that from our stats to make it a bit clearer to look at the trends. We're seeing such huge increases in demand. We always see a massive increase, obviously, when you have major events. But for arrivals into Qatar for the next month or two, we're up over 2,000%. It's such huge numbers. That travel is mainly from the UAE. Obviously, there's a lot of kind of shuttling back and forth going to be going on there, but then also from Saudi and from the UK as well. I think maybe more interesting than the fact that there's lots of demand happening, which you would really obviously expect, is what's going on in the pricing on the right-hand side. And this is the quote price per hour once again, and you've got that median line is the middle one, so that's the middle of the market pricing, and that's jumped up, as we would guess. We've got the 80th percentile, which really talks about the top range of the pricing, and that's jumped up hugely. And then we've got the 20th percentile, which is the bottom end of the pricing, and that's jumped up too. So they've all jumped up, but they've jumped up by different amounts. The top end has jumped up by over 100%, whereas the bottom end has jumped up by kind of 17% was the figure I calculated here, roughly. I think that what that shows is that there's a real spread of pricing going on heading into this event. There's a lot of quoting going on, which is really quite astronomical compared to what's happened in the past. But there's still some quotes going on which are kind of more what you might expect. So it will be interesting to see when the event's over to kind of hear back around, okay, well, of those kind of really astronomical prices that were kind of quoted, how many of them really were able to translate into bookings, and how much did the quotes, which were kind of increased but not by quite so much, kind of get the booking instead. That will be interesting to find out. So yeah, very much thank you for listening. Hopefully that was insightful just for the next couple of months. If you've got any further questions, points or whatever, then don't hesitate to get in touch. Thank you.